Hi, this is Paolo and welcome to the first part of the Blender Survival Guide. Blender has kind of a bad reputation as being a hard program to learn. Now, I tried many other 3D applications. I tried commercial applications that are as complex and as sophisticated as Blender. And let me tell you one thing. If you didn't have any documentation for those other programs, they would be as hard to learn. The problem with Blender is that for a long time it didn't have many good books. And what I mean with good is approachable by the common user, the end user, the artist instead of the programmer. So in this tutorial I'm going to try to create a guide that is extremely targeted for the motion graphic artist. So we're not going to see every single conceivable feature available in Blender, but we're going to focus on what are the most likely operations that you want to do as soon as you start using Blender from zero. Okay? So we're going to start using Blender 2.49. You can see the version number here. It's 2.49.2 because this is the B release. I'm not going to use 2.5 yet. I know that is out. There is an alpha. Alpha code is unstable. You should never use alpha releases in your production pipeline. It's okay to look around and to learn what is coming next, but 2.5 is not yet production quality. Not for us, at least. So we're going to stay with 2.49. Everything that we're going to learn today, you'll be able to use in 2.5, so nothing is lost. Let's start. This is Blender as you see it the first time you run it. I'm starting from the assumption that you just installed Blender, you didn't customize anything yet. This is what appears in your screen, more or less, depending on your resolution. What the hell is that? So the first thing we want to see is why there is a pink square in front of us, and what is all this other stuff. I found that the first thing I want to do normally when I try a new 3D program is to move around the camera and look at my scene. It doesn't matter what program it is, I want to be able to move the camera and pan and zoom around and orbit the camera. So let me tell you first how that is done. As we look at the scene here, you don't see it, but we are basically looking at our scene from above. You want to tilt, rotate, orbit the camera. Here's the quick trick. You press Alt or Option on the Mac. You hold it, then you press the left button of the mouse and you drag around. Okay? Now you see that this is actually a 3D scene. That was seen from above, from the top point of view. Okay? So you click on a area in the screen, hold, drag while you're using the Alt key, and move around. So basically when I say Alt, Macintosh users will have to assume Option. If I use the word Option, Windows users should assume Alt. So here it is, the first way of moving around. Okay, now let's add a little bit to it. If you press Alt and Shift, then you can click and move your scene. This is panning around, okay? And then if you want to zoom in and out, you use the wheel of the mouse. Okay, so now I can move around, I can pan, I can zoom out. All right, so we establish our first point of view. Next thing that usually new users want to do is, okay, I don't really care about the cube, I want to delete it. So they click on the cube, and that damn little crosshair moves around. What the hell is that? All right, lesson number 1. In Blender, you don't select with the left click, you select with the right click. So you right click on an object and that object becomes highlighted. Okay? So I can zoom out, see all these three objects. I click on this, I can click on this other thing, and I can click on this pyramid. Now this pyramid is your camera. When you render your scene, after you're finished doing all your damage, the rendering will appear through the camera point of view, no more no less in real life. If you are a director and you're shooting a scene, you'll have a camera operator in the scene, and what you'll see is the camera point of view. So that's what happens. You will not see the viewport render, you will see the camera point of view. Okay. What is this? This is a light. Like in real life, nothing happens, nothing is visible unless you have a light. If you don't have light, when you'll be rendering, you'll just see a black square. There is no light, so nothing that the camera can see. You can move the light, you can move the camera, you can move the objects. As I click on each object here, as I right click, of course, you can see in the lower part of the screen things changing. And that is because we are in editing. This is the editing button window, and editing is subject to the characteristics of every object. So if I'm clicking on a cube, which is basically what it's called a polygonal mesh, then I have properties that are related to that object. If I click on the camera, now I see things like the lens parameters, actually what it's called the focal length. In this case is 35 millimeters. We can go to 60 millimeters, 24 millimeters, so we can change it. If I click on the light, I have parameters for the light. So this panel is context sensitive. All right. But how do you change the camera back to the top view as I just did? Well, I have a keyboard shortcut, but let's take a look at this menu here. This is our 3D view because we can see our 3D scene. And this is the menu for that view. There is a view menu, a select menu, and an object menu. The view menu allows us to change the point of view of the view. A little redundant, but bear with me a second. So right now we can see that we are under top. If we want to see things from the side, from this point of view, we can select side. Now we see the same scene but from the side point of view. Okay? If I want to see from the front point of view, I have this other menu option. Now you can see that each camera point of view has a shortcut. Front is number 1 on the numeric pad, top is 7 on the numeric pad, and side is number 3. And layout is very intuitive. If you look at the numeric pad, and you'll see how it's distributed. The key, number 1 key, is in fact what it could be considered the front. The 7 is higher above, so it could be at this point here. And number 3 is looking at the scene from the side. You can use the numeric pad, you can use the menu, whatever is preferable. So let's recap. You can move with Alt, you can orbit the camera, Alt and drag, Alt and Shift, you pan around, you zoom, right click to select the objects. Now how we delete this cube. Deletion in Blender is always performed with the X key, not through the delete key, but with the X. So you press X after you select the object, and Blender will say, well, do you really want to do that? And I confirm. I say, yes, I want to do that. And the cube now is gone. If I want to delete the light, I can right-click on the light, press X, and delete. And it's gone. Now we have a scene with just the camera. And that is the first way of cleaning up the scene. So now what the hell is the little crosshair? That is called the 3D cursor, and it has a very, very useful use in Blender, but we'll see how that is used a little later on. Let's see now how we can create a default view of the Blender scene that is a little more friendly for us. Let me reset the scene. If I go to File and I press New, I click on New, I will create a new scene. You see that the keyboard equivalent is Control X. So New, and Blender asks me, are you sure you want to erase all? Yes, I want to erase all. I have nothing right now. And we start from the beginning. And the cube is back in there. That is because Blender has a default scene that it loads every time we create a new scene. And we'll see how to change that. But let's start from the beginning. First of all, you see this area here, the menu, object mode, all these other gizmos. This is called a header. And I can call a menu to control the position of the header by right-clicking on a blank area of the header. Now, there is one thing that bothers me from the beginning, and is that the header in the 3D view is here at the bottom, and the header in this button panel is at the top. So I like consistency, and I like to put the header at the top as well. If I click on top, now it will be here. So now I have the same place where I'm looking, regardless of what view I'm using. So if I'm using the button window here, the header is at the top. If I'm in the 3D view, the header is at the top. But now if I go to File, New, and I create a new scene again, it will be back at the bottom. I like to keep that permanent. And I also like to see what is the point of view of the camera, so that I can adjust the camera. And I like to be able to see things like from the top and from a side or a front view. So how can we change all this? Now, if we look at the top menu here, you'll see that there is something cryptically called SR2-model. These are basically screen configurations. And these are automatically defined by Blender when you install it. So if we click on one, for example, that is a screen layout for animation. So look at that, it's completely different. Now we see that we can rearrange the Blender desktop in a completely different way. Is this what we want? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Model is what we started from the beginning. There is basically a layout suitable for modeling, creating new objects. Then we continue to 3, material, how to define materials. And then there is a sequence that is suitable for animation. And then scripting that we don't want to even look at right now. So what I like to do is basically create a variation of this that is more complete and user-friendly. So how do we do that? Blender comes with a bunch of predefined spaces, screens as they're called, but we can create a new one. So what we need to do is first go back to our number 2 model, which we will use as our starting point. And then we click on Add New. When we click on that, the new screen will ask us, well, you want to create an empty one or want to create a duplicate? And we'll select duplicate because we want to duplicate this screen and create a new one for us. So duplicate and it seems like nothing has happened, but in reality, you can see that there is number 2-model.001. Blender created a new screen and changed the name just to avoid conflicts and ambiguities. All right. So first of all, I'm going to change the name because model.001 doesn't quite describe what I like. So I simply click on this space, and you see that it gets a lot highlighted, and I'll type something as simple as my model. Okay? So now anything that we are doing to this space will be in the My Model screen. It will not change any of these. Okay? Good. So first of all, let's put this header at the top. Okay? Then I'd like to split this space and have multiple views of the scene. The way I do it is I place my mouse here. It's important you start kind of in the middle of the screen and slowly move up until I get this separation line and see there is a grabbing hand. At that point, you right click and the menu says split area or join area or no header. We don't care about the other two. Select the first one, split area. Click on it, and now you see there is a separator moving as you move the mouse. So we're going to put it right there, smack in the middle, and press the left click of the left button of the mouse. Ooh. So now we have split the screen in two, and we see the same exact scene. Don't worry about that. The other thing I want to do is this. Since I'm going to use this for After Effects animations, I'd like to have a timeline available, and usually whenever I work, my timeline is kind of at the bottom of the screen. So I don't care for the buttons to be here. I like to have them at the right side of the screen in a vertical layout, and I like to replace this area with a timeline. So let's continue. As we did before, we place the mouse here, we go up a little bit, and when it becomes a grabbing hand, right click, and again split area, and now we have another separator. So let's place it about like here. Now we have 1, 2, and 3, and they are the same exact scene. Well, let me show you another important secret of Blender. In the header, there is a button here at the top left of every header. There is a button, and that button selects what kind of window you can have in this space. So by default, we use the 3D view. But if I click on this, I can open the menu that shows me all the views, all the windows that Blender has. So in here we want the 3D view. We just want this view to be, for example, from the side. And now I press Shift, Option, and I can drag around and I can zoom in. And now I can see my camera, which is here and here, my light, which is here and here, and my object. I just have 2 points of view here. That's good enough. I can even move my separator here and resize to the kind of proportion I want. This depends highly on the resolution of your screen. Okay, let's change this window here to use the buttons. This is called the buttons view. See the icon that is representing this view? All right. We select the buttons window, and well, this is not quite what I was expecting. By default, Blender uses a horizontal layout. Just click on any free area, any blank area of the window, right click, and then in the panel alignment menu, select vertical. There you go. These are exactly the same buttons you see here. Let's resize a little bit. Exactly the same buttons in a different window. So that frees this area of the desktop, and we can just drag it down a little bit. And in the header, we click and we select timeline. Now this is a much more interesting layout for me, except that I'm still missing the camera's point of view. And you know what? I'm going to split this in two different sections, and I'll assign a section to the camera view. With the mouse on this panel, move to the left slowly. Don't overflow. Just move to the left slowly and right-click and split area again. And now we have an horizontal separator. Position it where you want. Click. Now this panel is split in two different 3D views. In this 3D view, we click on View, and we go to Cameras, and we select Camera Active. And now we see the camera's point of view. In fact, if I move it, you see how that view changes. And now we see exactly what will be rendered by Blender. How do we make this permanent? So the next time Blender will start exactly at this point, you press Control U to save the user's preferences. I think it's also here, Save Default Settings. The label in the menu doesn't quite work with a keystroke. I like to think about that as the user preferences. So Control U, nothing seems to have happened. The configuration is being saved. And what it means is that we can close, we can quit Blender, start it again, and now Blender is exactly where we left it. We have our 3D view, another 3D view, camera view, buttons here, timeline here. Very nice. In fact, I should move the playhead at frame number 1 and save it again, so that will be the default from that point on. Okay, so let's stop it right now. This is the end of part 1 for the survival guide. I'll see you in the next video.